podcast where faith meets exploration.
And how's it going, Logan?
It is going wonderful, and thank you for having me on, representing Symphony of Heaven, and just as personally on here. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to this conversation. So,
It's awesome. I am back in the US, so for my listeners who missed me, we're back into it, and we're kicking off I can't remember what season I'm supposed to be on, but whatever the new season is, this is going to be the first episode of it. It's going in 2025, and kind of continuing my spree of not turning into a Christian metal or music review podcast, but it's just what I'm interested into. And a lot of guys need the exposure and conversation, and it's really awesome kind of seeing and following you. So really enjoy it.
And like I said, I love doing this style of format, and like I said, I have a lot to say. And like I told Pastor Bob, I think God gave me a big mouth, so that seems to be what happens half the time. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and it's just it's kind of memorable. I have experience, and as you pointed out, I personally have stuff that changes. Something to quote Joe Rogan is, I'm not married to my ideas. There's certain things that, sometimes things can change and you can have new perspective. And I have enough humility to look at some things that were childish thoughts or things that I wasn't fully aware of. And I allow the nuance and caveats to help influence my decisions and to respectfully grow to where I feel the Lord would have me go. And I think that's like all of our spiritual journey. It's kind of like the first people who started wandering and populating the world, they just kind of went, and,
Yes.
Stuff happens.
Yeah, we learn along the way. That is every human, every man. And I always like to say, and I don't know if I came up with this or just, I don't know. I'll claim it, fine. But that which isn't growing is dead. And I mean, when you think about it, if a tree isn't growing, if it's not sprouting, it's because it's dead. Everything that grows, everything that's not growing is not alive. So it's like we're human, we're growing, we're going to change, we're going to mature, and we're going to go further down the road, God willing. So it's not just we're constantly growing, constantly learning. If we're wise, and that it's a slightly different. Nobody's journey is exactly the same. And so that's what makes it really interesting, especially as I've come to know through the band a lot of people around the world from all different types of backgrounds, Christian and non-Christian. It's been really amazing to see, like, how I've met all these people and just learned all these different stories. And it's definitely been eye-opening and a blessing to see, for sure.
And there's a Orthodox morning prayer that basically asks the Lord to remind us that all things are sent by Him, whether good or bad for us. And so I think even though we may not like what's going on, there's something to be learned, or it's an experience to gain. And something else I've kind of discovered is sometimes stuff doesn't happen to you, but it happens to you for others.
Yes.
I would say that's kind of becoming a fool for Christ. We become the example in a certain way to allow people the opportunity to act and bestow Christ-like grace and love on. And sometimes it's really hard to remember. And, not everybody makes the best decisions.
That reminds me of, like, I think it's in Second Corinthians that all the times that I'm paraphrasing, all the times that we've suffered, God has been our comforter so that we can then go and comfort others with the comfort that we received. So in a way, you can think about it as kind of like, it is a mission, it is a blessing and an opportunity that apparently God thought you worthy of to try and you're going to go through this. I'm going to be with you, and then you go and show everyone else in the flesh, so to speak, what I've shown you through your suffering, how I'm there. So I can see the correlation there, that things happen to us sometimes not for our benefit, but also just as much to benefit those around us. So
Yeah, and today, what was it? It was Hebrews chapter 2, 11 through 18. This part stood out. Therefore, he that had made himself brethren in every respect, so that he might become merciful and a faithful high priest in the service of God to make expiation for the sins of the people. For because he himself suffered and was tempted, he is able to help those who are tempted.
Hebrews, did you say Hebrews 2?
Yeah, Hebrews 2, verses
And
11 through 18.
11 through 18. And isn't there in also in Hebrews where in that context he's not afraid? Yeah, I mean, yeah, you said it. He's not afraid to call them brethren, not afraid to call them brother. Man, that's a powerful thing.
Yeah,
You
and there's
know,
so many nuances to that. Like this is talking about Christ, but it's also talking about, men of God and women of
mm-hmm,
God who want to, take on that mantle of um the priesthood or joining as brides of Christ. And
mm-hmm.
it's also on us as individuals as well. It's like there's so much you could write. I bet you could have a dissertation on that.
Oh
Uh
yeah, and I think that's why I always remember that because it's kind of like that's the very earthy kind of dirt down at the dirt level where it's kind of like Jesus is calling me like a brother, and it's like whoa. I mean, like I said, you could talk for hours on that, but just on a very dirt level, low level, kind of like that is comforting, so comforting because what do we all need, especially in the world today as people our age have seen. You need that rock, that brother, that friend, that shoulder, in a crude kind of way, but we do need that, and that's what I've kind of tried to do with my dealings with Symphony of Heaven with the band is just be that friend, be that brother to people. Um, because if Jesus is going to do that for us and bring us into his family, call us brother, you know, I should be heading that direction. I should be trying to make sure that I'm there with every ounce of my being to try and support and um, serve others in however I can, you know. So
and it's really hard. And it's like it's a skill, it's a habit, it's a personality. Some people are inclined to it, some people aren't. And then we also live in a crazy time where it's almost like the safest thing to do is not be involved with anything. I was trying to help somebody out last year during the holidays. They basically a whole bunch of stuff came down from it, and it was completely fake. They had photoshopped everything. They created fake profiles, and it was like wow, like the deceivers are deceiving, and
yeah,
um, it's kind of hard because when you get burned like that, your willingness to help others is reflected by that pain of touching a hot stove. You think
yep,
about it before you do it, and that kind of hurts because it's like maybe somebody really does need that, but it's like at the same time, money doesn't grow on trees, and
yeah,
I you can't help everybody
no. Oh,
because
you wish you could, but you just
yeah.
there's only so much time, only so much money, and you do the best you can. But I like that what you said, like getting burned by a hot stove, and I've had a lot of those experiences in my life, and I think, like you said, it's tough sometimes to be that brother, be that support for our fellow man. And I think to even go back again to the previous thing about God helping us in our suffering so that we can help others. God has been with me through a lot of things over the last decade ish or so that was so tough, and I just didn't understand. And I still to this day, have sometimes where it's kind of like you're not sure why the storm's there, but literally all you can do is like grab onto something and close your eyes, and all of a sudden the storm is past. You're like, well, I don't know what that was about, and I'm not sure if I'm ever going to know what that was about. And you might not ever know the exact full reason, but you do see the fruit of it where it's like, okay, but I did learn this from that, and I can go help others. I can be that brother. I know what I needed when I needed people to be a shoulder to me to lean on. And so I know I can do that because I know what it meant. I know what it meant to me. Um, that really inspired me with, like I said, with the music, because it's a very unique medium. Music is. It's like an onion. There's so many layers to it, so many great layers that we have. Even if people don't believe exactly like me, we have a common ground. And in that common ground, I can show people the love of Jesus. I can praise God through that. It makes me happy. It's a blessing. And then I can be a blessing. It's like I said, it's like an onion. And it's just so many different things all at once that we've been able to do, even with Symphony of Heaven. Like when we go and play a show, most of the time, or half the time, it's been secular venues. We actually fit in quite well and somewhat prefer to play secular shows because style-wise, there's not as many Christian bands playing more of the style we do, so we kind of tend to fit in more on the music aspect level. And we make a lot of friends, and we've met a lot of people over the years through all this, and some of them have ended up becoming Christian. And I don't want to say it was because of us, but maybe it's because it's like they saw a lot of people in the metal community, even though they might like try and say, I'm big, bad, and tough, and I'm this satanic black metal guy or whatever. And then you get to talking to them, they're not. They have questions. They're searching. They just needed to see that it's okay to search and okay to end up where we are in faith, believing in God, because they're always thinking about that, and so I feel like in a way, maybe that's where God's placed us. Just literally like a light in a dark place. We got a lot of work to do, and we're continuing to try. But these are the things that go through my mind all the time, where I have found myself with all this. So it's been really interesting.
And I think we're about the same age in our mid. Like I'm in my mid 30s at this point. Crossing that hump, getting closer to 40.
It's all downhill from here.
Yeah, like. And even those groups that got us like the early metal, like the original, it wasn't even called metalcore back then. But if you think about like the Devil Wears Prada and all those bands, that some of them have stayed in the faith, some of them stopped touring, whatever it was, whatever it got us into the music. I feel like there's a whole generation that's impacted. Something that in my spiritual journey coming across is like how many people view metal as purely satanic. And like in orthodoxy itself, is there's some factions that are like no music whatsoever, and then there's some people who are completely cool with it. My last priest he thought it was the coolest thing ever, and he was like encouraging me to learn how to play guitar. I don't have time
That's
for that
awesome.
right now, but it's like people, you have to be, I think there is some good of it, like.
Yeah. Well,
I
go ahead. I don't want to
No,
cut you
you go
off
ahead.
because I talk.
No, you
Well,
had
I
a
was going to
thought.
say,
I saw it.
to going to that where, I grew up in that as well. Not so much. I grew up in you call it a country church. It was in town, but the town was only like 900 people. And it was half the church was my family. So my background is independent Christian church. For those that know a little bit of American history, you come out of like the Stone Campbell Restoration movement, that group of churches, and it kind of did a bunch of things throughout the years, and it split here and it split there and it split. You know how that goes. But just independent Christian church. I think. Oh my gosh, what was his name? A lot of the like maybe Johnson Bible College in Tennessee, Ozark Christian College in Arkansas. Kyle Eidelman is kind of part of Southeast Christian Church in Louisville. That group of church, like brother and sister churches. Not the Church of Christ that comes from that thinks they're the only church. Not that Church of Christ. So anyway, but that's just a little background on where I'm coming from in all this. And man, I hope I just didn't forget what I was going to say. You might cut this part. Music. Yeah. So everybody in my church knew me because it was a family. It was like family church. I had been going there since I was born there, basically. You know, my grandparents were baptized there. My parents were baptized and married there. I was baptized and married there. My wife was baptized there. My first kid was baptized, maybe. One of them were before we had ended up moving. But I didn't experience that so much as far as like people would look at me and like when I got into rock and metal and stuff like that in middle school and high school, they didn't think much of it. You got a few of the sly comments and things like that, but really, you know, they knew me. They knew who I was, and so it wasn't as dangerous, I guess you could say. And I was always been a very thoughtful person, and I would, you know, because I would see these people saying this, and you know, metal is very disturbing to a young kid in a good way. You're like, I don't know what it is about this that seems really dark, for lack of a better word, like heavy, dark, like something is there. I don't know what it is, but there's something there. So I would get into like, okay, what's this issue? Let's explore this. Am I doing something wrong here? And I've always come to the conclusion, no. And the Hebrew word, and this has come to me in the last maybe year or two, and I hope I don't get this wrong, but the Hebrew word for glory, I believe, is the same context and used of the same type of idea as heavy, like a weightiness, a heaviness, a fullness, glory. So I was just kind of like, well, isn't that funny when we call heavy metal? And we all have this idea that there's something there. There's a fullness, a heaviness, a weightiness to this art form that it's used in the same way, talking about God's glory and his presence and things like that. And to me, God made all music. He made the ability to create art and everything. So it's kind of like I can, in my heart and mind, I can see how in the world could anybody say this is satanic? It can't be. This is like what God meant when he talking about art and music, something that means something. It has impact. It has weightiness, glory. So I hope that wasn't too much of a tangent, but to talking about how people thought that like metal is all satanic and stuff, as you were saying.
And I just looked it up on the Bible Hub real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I have a gaming keyboard, so clickety click click.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, 100. It's pronounced kabod.
Right.
Glory, honor, splendor, and exactly denotes primary concept that is used to describe a weightiness or significance of something or someone, often in terms of reputation, wealth, or glory. In context of God, refers to his majestic presence, manifestation of his divine attributes, and can imply honor and respect due to individuals or objects of significance. Glory was often associated with the previous concepts. The Hebrew Bible reflects these cultural values, emphasizing the importance of honor in social religious context. Glory to God described as a central theme, representing his divine presence and authority. Israelites understood God's glory as a visible manifestation, such as cloud and fire in the wilderness, intrinsic attribute of his nature.
Yes. So I think they said wait, maybe in there somewhere.
You were 100% right.
Okay. So I was like, yay, I got that. I wasn't wrong. I was like, because I study and I read a lot, and sometimes I'll remember something, but I might misremember it. So I always have to kind of, I always put that caveat in there. I check me on that. So, yeah, I mean, so but to go back to what you were saying, like, what was your experience with when you got into rock and metal and things like that in your circles growing up? And because you said everybody was looking at that, like, what was, because my experience wasn't so bad. Like, I was very blessed with a very understanding church. What was your experience with that? Because I feel like I'm the outlier here on a lot of things. Like, I had really good growing up, really did. Wasn't very judged at all. Never understood the whole like, oh, people judge me because I listen to metal in the church. I'm like, I don't get it. It never happened to me.
I would say mine was the typical response. I wasn't allowed to listen to Linkin Park.
Well, I wouldn't let you listen to Linkin Park either. So good on that.
Yeah. I was really into different types of music. Bob Marley. I was just trying to find myself when I started listening to music. And, I didn't know, like, it's kind of dumb, but it's kind of like as a kid, like some of the things you just thought just weren't true.
Mhm.
I had no idea that Led Zeppelin like wasn't a thing anymore. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
like, it's just, that's just the music that was on. I was never into like researching that. And then, I watched a movie called The Red Violin. And after that, for some reason, and then I want to say it also like coincided with seeing the movie Queen of the Damned. Uh, I wanted to
Oh, that soundtrack. Yeah.
I wanted to play the violin. And so I got into the violin, and then we moved away from a school that had an orchestra. And so basically without an instruction or motivation to learn, it just kind of like I put that on the shelf and just kind of didn't do that. And then um, I got when I moved to Utah, alternative rock was just like the thing. And so that's what I was into. So it's kind of funny in high school, I wasn't one of those scene kids that was into like emo music because like I was like, I just don't it didn't catch me.
Yeah.
So like Atreyu or Alkaline, I just if that's even a band, I don't know, it doesn't sound right. Was it
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
No, there's some. Yeah, I
There's
can't.
something, yeah.
Alkaline
So
Trio.
Alkaline Trio,
Yeah.
oh, what's that? There's a couple others, like some of the original like I had people in my class in high school that were like pure emo. That's how they dressed every day.
Yeah.
That just wasn't me. In high school, it's kind of like one of the weird phases where I didn't really listen to music. It wasn't a desire.
Yeah.
And then if I did, it was like, it always creeped my younger sister out because I would sleep to like classical music, and sometimes they'd be
Yeah.
playing some like crazy operas
Yeah.
about hauntings and ghosts and stuff. So really, it kind of bothered her. But and then I really got into alternative. I was a Coldplay freak, and then I just started listening to more music, and I discovered Coheed and Cambria. Still love Coheed, and then my background is I was more of a missionary, and you basically don't listen to music. And I think out of um, rebellion, when I came back, I had to find like the heaviest stuff I could, and so I got back. I listened to all this stuff in high school I never listened to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I got into metalcore and started going to all these concerts, and then the Color Morale, Devil Wears Prada, For Today, and started doing all these things. We Came as Romans,
Hmm.
and a bunch of local bands that don't even exist anymore. That's kind of funny, that had potential but just couldn't quite get it, and had a lot of uh, uh, strife within the band, so they just aren't a thing anymore. But I still have a lot of those albums, and then I just started listening to heavier and heavier stuff. And then as I kind of went into that, I got into deathcore. Um, and what kind of pulled me, like, I still love deathcore. I do deathcore. Uh, I had a friend that was, or a coworker rather, who thought I was atheist based off the music I listened to.
Oh boy.
And that kind of woke me up, like, what does that mean? And so I started looking at it from that perspective. And so for a little bit, I stopped listening to it. And then I don't know, during COVID, I just started listening to deathcore again, just because like there was some bit of it. And then I was like, I want to listen to like Christian deathcore. And that's when I started listening to a lot of stuff. And I've found a whole genre of Christian. I'd say it's underground because it's not owned by Sony. You know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah,
there's
yeah.
so many great people in the last 3 years. I've met so many people. I hope they consider me friends, or at least a good acquaintance. But I've had a lot of the bands I listen to on here to include Symphony of Heaven. It's not the style that I'll listen to it, but it's not something that goes on there. But knowing that there's options out there, I think
Oh yeah.
is good, and it serves a purpose. So,
Well,
but
and thank you.
I'm
Like I
very
said, thank you for
eclectic.
having us.
I'm
Yeah.
very eclectic. So my music, if you look to my Apple Music, which I don't purchase music through there anymore, but it would be everything. I had First Peoples Nation, EDM music. I was into EDM for a little bit, a whole bunch of different stuff. It's
Like
just,
Skrillex, like in
oh, not even Skrillex. I was like, Skrillex is too mainstream. I didn't like that. So I was listening to a bunch of like house music and, getting
yeah.
into that. So it's just kind of all over. Um, but I did have some times where I've had conversation where it's like moms against deathcore. Uh, reactions, or I've had people just say like, you're going to hell for doing that. The devil, that's devil music and stuff, which, you know, Blue Oyster Cult, there are legitimate satanic bands that want to do nothing but,
Yeah.
preach evil. But people need to remember a lot of these bands are just reactionary to the cultural climate they grew up in.
Yes. And I think, and like I said, I thought about through this at all. And you mentioned Spotify. I'll tell you, let's see here. I'll tell you the top 5 or 6 things on my Spotify, just to give you what I listen to or play to. Give It Up or Give It All, Unleash the Archers, Psychosocial from Slipknot, because I drummed to that back right there. It's a good warm-up song. Meshuggah, Hypocrisy, Pantera, Winter Phyllis, and Pentacrator. That's like that's like a typical day in the life of Logan's listening. And, a lot of these bands, so when I got into things, it was, so my mom was a music teacher. And from the earliest age, she lived, slept, breathed, ate music. Like, that's who she was. She did choir. She helped out at church. She taught at the Christian school down in Evansville, and that's where I started out with. My earliest remembrance of music that I knew and was aware that it was an album was Michael W. Smith's Go West Young Man, and it was on tape. And she would put that in the tape player every day on the way to school. And I remember, like, this is really cool. I like this. And it was catchy. And I've gone back and listened to it 100 times because it's like a life-defining album for me. I love it. But it's like, this is kind of like 80s rock. Kind of, it's got some little bit of edginess to it, especially at the time. I'm like, so from a very early age, I was into things that were a little bit pushing the envelope. Because you got to remember, even in the 80s in the Christian scene, that style, it wasn't Gaithers. It wasn't, the hymns. I love the hymns. But it was, people had a problem with it like they had a problem with Amy Grant, which was another one she was big into. So it was more the Christian rock. So as I got older, I got into country because that was what was on the bus. Still love country. And, but I got into middle school, and my sister got in. She was a year ahead of me, and she got into high school or something, and I started seeing something about a band called Korn, and I was like, what is this? And they had a Hot Topic that had just opened up at the mall, and it was dark in there, and they had loud music, and all the older kids would listen to Korn and talk about Korn and all this stuff, and I'm like, who is this band? So I had a poster on my wall before I ever heard them, because I didn't have access to find them on the internet. I had one radio station that would play rock and metal, and it was so... the reception was so bad, you had to like hold the thing up in my room just perfectly. And when I finally heard Korn and Limp Bizkit come on the radio, I recorded it, and it was all crappy sounding and everything else. But that was kind of like, I knew that there was something more to this, and that was my first introduction to the heavier music. And then was big into Korn and nu metal, Static X, System of a Down, all the Mudvayne, bands like that. And then saw Metallica in 2000, Summer Sanitarium tour, and that's when I didn't jump off, but that's when I dove headlong into the more traditional and extreme styles of metal, thrash. Then I got into death, black metal, not so much traditional black metal, but like Dimmu Borgir and Cradle of Filth, more high production style. There was a band called Dragon Lord. That was Eric Peterson from Testament. That was his like black thrash band. I remember we found that on Napster somehow. I don't know. It was so, and I was learning guitar, and I had been a drummer since like 4th grade. I've always just had rhythm and music, and so that was my journey into music. And they didn't like my parents. I bought the first Korn album at Coconuts, which just recently is just now closing down. That's how far back this goes. It's the last Coconut store ever. And that's where I bought Korn's self-titled album. And my dad looked at the back, because he went in there with me. It was right after church. And I was like, I'm going to buy this album. And he looked at the album, the song titles. If you know some of the song titles on that self-titled Korn album, if you're a dad looking at your 15-year-old son, like, what in the world is this? And so he said, my mom saw it. You're not taking that. I put it under the seat in the back of the van on the ride home. I'm like, okay, they're going to forget about this. I ran downstairs. I got to put something up. Walked out the back door, walked back up to the van, grabbed the CD, went back downstairs and threw it and hid it in my closet. And then when they finally figured out I still had it and I was fine, they're like, okay, just be careful. I understand, but yeah, I think you're fine. So
Yeah, it's interesting the things that you snuck around doing. I had a relative that burned a Slipknot disc, and I just wrote Britney Spears on it.
oh, that's genius, man. That is
Yeah.
really, but they would have thought now.
I mean, I did
know?
have I had a crush on Britney Spears as a kid growing up.
Oh, we all did.
So,
We all did.
and I did have a lot of Britney Spears stuff, so it was a believable thing, and nobody ever questioned it. I was just like, turn down the Walkman.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, I don't know. I think music is I think music has a spiritual importance. Um, and then for people who say that, the music is of the devil, it's like, have you read the Old Testament? Like
Yeah.
Psalms of David?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and
It's
they
heavy
still,
stuff.
there's people who still play the music, which, they argue this is what the sounded like, or we don't really know exactly what the tune is, but this plays to the tune of it. So I love listening to that sometimes. And it's just like, harp and lyre back, the Scott, it's believed that the Scottish got the bagpipes from, people traveling around the world and bringing those over from the Middle East. So
Am I not correct that like Antiochian liturgy, or is it like the Antiochian church? I think I read this the other day, and it mentioned bagpipes, or was it Syriac? I'm not sure, but it was kind of like, bagpipes, Middle East, ancient form of worship. And I'm like, that's interesting. I did not realize that, but it makes sense, to me that they would have instruments like that in that area, you know. Yeah. So, but you keep going. I've talked a bunch. So,
yeah. And that's a whole subject that you could have a degree on, is music and instruments. So I think it's ignorant on people's behalf to claim that something is purely satanic because the modes of music. I do think there's degrees of music in respect to worship. I personally, I don't think that. I think there's some benefit of people having praise style worship with actual music ensembles. But for me, it always felt like that's not the way it should be. And so, I don't agree with it, but that's what people have, and that's how they connect to God. Sorry, my cat is scratching and she is shedding. It is terrible.
no,
Every
you're
time
fine.
it's like poofing.
Well, I will tell you this. I love, if anybody from my church sees this, I love you all. I really do. My personal, I don't appreciate modern worship music much at all. Now, in the sense of like, we're here worshiping together because I like harder styles of music and this just isn't my thing. I intentionally put my preference down to be able to worship together. And because I can find a lot of good in some of these songs, but I have to like put down the fact that this isn't the way I would do this and things like that, so that because I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy, because like when I was growing up, we had the hymns. I want to go back to the hymns. In reality, I want to go like be persecuted by the government and we have to worship in a cave by candlelight and sing hymns because that's all we can do. That would be my preferred form of church right there. So, but it's like, I have to put down my preference in the best way I know how, as long as it's not something that's just so out of left field and just like, what is this? Because we're all in different spots. And if I can do this and worship together with the church, that's what I need to be doing. That's my conviction on that. But if I had my preference, I would everybody would take a hymnal and we would all sing together, and there'd be an old lady on the left up front with a piano and an old blind lady on the right playing an organ, and it would be out of time and hitting wrong notes, and we would all sing out of key, but but we were together as the church, and that's how I grew up. So I'm very nostalgic for that. So I'm not crying, you're crying.
And I think that's where it connects. J.R. Tolkien, I went on a binge. I listened to all the audiobooks. Just because, if I'm gonna listen to something, I'm gonna listen to something. I've read the books in the past or whatever. And his universe was so interesting. And he kept trying to say it wasn't Christian built, but there's so much you can't deny the Christian influence that J.R.R. put into Lord of the Rings. Like
Yes.
you try to disassociate it, but it's there. There's so
He
much
couldn't.
of that. And I think it was his expression of trying to understand Christianity, but it was interesting in his world, it was literally formed by the music of the Ainur.
Yes.
Through angelic symphonies formed the world. And so I think and then looking at the association and spread and human history. Sorry, Mario walked by. The music is probably one of the first forms of artistic expression out of the Garden of Gethsemane. And there's even some other arguments about it and its importance. There's whole, people make a academic career out of studying music in relation to different religions and nations. And
there's something transcendent.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm not going to, if the reason how they go to church is to go and experience that worship music, there's nothing, I don't think that's wrong. I think there's good, better, and best out of that quality and experience. But they're in church. I may not agree with their church or their beliefs, but it's better than not going to church, the alternative. And so I think that's where there's the dichotomy of that and the nuance and a reflection of that. I feel like some of these hardline Bible thumping Christians can't disassociate that. And it's like at the same time, it's like the Bible talks about how much there shouldn't be drunkenness, but look how many Protestants openly drink alcohol. But if you go back in time, it was something that they rejected.
Oh, is it as far as like Protestants earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so it's like you guys have this argument against that, but you're openly okay with that. You know what I mean?
Well,
so it's like
it just depends on which, because it was a funny story. It was like because a lot of the guys that I know in Christian metal would be from Europe, so they're more like Lutheran or things like that. They don't have a single problem with drinking over there. Like, compared to an American growing up, like, no, that's why we use Welch's. I'm like, oh, wait a minute here. I'm like, there was a problem with it. It's kind of like that old joke about like Southern Baptists. They don't like dancing because it'll lead to what. Or you could also say they don't like what because it'll lead to dancing. It's just kind of like they couldn't see past this. It was more cultural, I believe, because if we have so many friends from, like I say, Sweden, and you could just tell the cultural differences, and yet they still consider themselves Christians, and what is permissible and what is not, and there's like this sliding scale of like, and they just don't understand it. Like, what do you almost like? We're teetotalers over here in America. That was our spiritual heritage, and you get a lot of that in Protestant circles. Not so much. The Reformed dudes, they love their draft. They love their IPAs and their tobacco pipe. So I'm like, good on you. There you go. And then the other ones don't like any of it, and so it's very interesting to see all this from my perspective in Indiana, and just like growing up drilled into my head. What was the early church? We have the Bible. We can all agree on this. Let's start there. Okay, let's start there. Awesome. And then you see all these other things, and it's just kind of like, but where did that come from? We're all trying to do our best. Like you said, at least they're in church. We're trying here, and we're growing. We're not going to get there all at the same time, and our journeys are going to look different. Because as you'll know, as into rock and metal, as a Christian, maybe just from some aspects of society, you do feel like the outlier. You feel like the one that doesn't have a place, the one that feels. And so I never felt that from my church. Well, I have later on in life, strangely enough. But it's kind of like you understand what it's like to not have that place, not have that community, or be rejected because of something that you see no problem with. You're like, this makes perfect sense to me, and then other people would literally to anathematize you, to use a more than Protestant word, because we don't never use anathematize, but it is just always strange to me, and I'm just growing up, and I'm just like, man, I don't know. Like I said, I could. That's a whole nother tangent I could go into. But I don't. I like I said, I talk a lot, so you say something now.
No, it's the whole point of the conversation is just to have the conversation where it goes. Talking about it, I'd feel remiss if I didn't shout out Christopher Johnson of Hard Look and his other band. But I mean, he plays for his church, like, so there's people who do stuff, and that's how they do. And I need to have him on again and catch up with them. But it's just an interesting conversation, and I think you can tell a lot about a person's theology based off of the response to music is purely satanic, or it's like there's degrees of it. Now, as it has been said, there are some bands are purely like I'll agree wholeheartedly. Somebody in deathcore genre, there's a lot of people that do it. There's a band right now, Ghost, who's just a pure mockery of Catholicism, and it's like, yes, there are bands that do that, but let's be real though. Ghost is mostly a rebellion against Catholicism and a mockery of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, it is satanic because of that. But there's bands that actually do have, terrible stuff. So
yeah. Well, that's you mentioned Ghost, and I'm just sitting there a little bit. I mean, because the metal media has shoved Ghost down my throat for years, and I can't. I'm gonna go off because I can't stand that band simply because of the fact that it's the greatest metal band of all time. They're not even metal. They sound like Boston. They sound like 70s rock from the little bit that I've heard. My daughter played them for me one time as a joke. She's like, "Who is this?" I'm like, "I don't know who this is. It sounds like a Boston cover band." She's like, "No, it's Ghost." I'm like, "You get that off my phone right now." It's just, but it's like to go to, some bands are doing it to do a reactionary, to repel against the church and society and things like that. But right here on my mom's keyboard, if I took all the words out of Ghost songs and didn't have his vocals on the track, it's the same notes as another song. There's only so many notes, and they've all been done before in different ways, but it's the same combination. So it's not, it cannot be that sound waves that are from a physical medium that God himself created in the beginning with his word. That's God's creation. We are able to manipulate things for evil, but it's never the things themselves that intrinsically, inherently, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And I thought about this lately because I've been going a lot. I've been having this idea of Joshua coming and marching on Jericho and blowing the horns and knocking the walls down. And I've kind of taken that in a response to kind of like Behemoth's song "Blow Your Horns, Gabriel" or something. One of their more well-known songs, and I'm like, blow your trumpet, Gabriel, or something. But I'm like, blow your horns, Israel, because as a Christian, especially in the metal scene, and they always like, you're a Christian, you can't play metal, this is ours. I'm like, oh no, sir, it was never yours. It was never yours at all. So Joshua goes in, and they're told to basically annihilate all the people there, all the military men and stuff like that, but keep the things dedicated to God. the gold, the silver, and all these things. Keep that. That's to go to God. And it's kind of like I had kind of a thought that like God kept the things in the city that were neutral. They were His. It was the heart of the people inside is where the evil was coming from. If that makes any sense, I'm developing and exploring that idea more here recently. So it's been kind of like that's probably a pretty good theological idea to explore about differentiating between the heart and the physical creation, especially to do with music, because we are dealing and manipulating physical creation, and that's really cool.
And something else, if you look at the what's that? I can't remember the term of it, but it's like if you look at the way Satan has operated throughout the Bible, it's always through corruption. He can't create.
Yes.
And so, yes, there are parts of the Bible that says he is the God of this world for now. But Christ has trampled him down and will do so. And it's like it's easy to corrupt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like it's ironic how many people say we should be vegans, but if you think about it, a vegan was the first murderer.
Yeah.
Yes. Cain was a farmer. It was Abel who farmed the sheep.
Yep.
And so it's kind of, some of the arguments people make are just silly, but I think right now is an excellent time. This is back in September this year, the band Bloodlines. Show spoke about how pornography will not take a hold of you. And all of a sudden it's on metal injection and people are rallying against them and, blah, blah, blah. It's just this disgusting, like, why would they talk about it? And then people have just been making fun of them, like, oh, they've never, masturbated or et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like, but there's that people think about like how crazy it is, how readily available pornography is, and they speak out against it and they are immediately demonized for it. And so to turn around and say that they are equally satanic or whatever it's a stupid argument that people just need to drop already.
I thought that was the greatest thing ever because, for one, the majority of the comments on all those posts were just a bunch of basement dwellers that, I know I'm in my basement, but I mean, my gosh. And it's like, you're like making fun of them. Are you kidding me? They're all over the world now. They're still remembered. What you intended for evil, God intended for good. You were going to shame them and make fun of them. And all it did was get more people to listen to their music, introduce them to more people, and gain them more of a following. And it's so it's like you can't stop it. You try and bring it down, and it's like when they would kill the martyrs, under in the 1 to 200s and stuff like this. And I was reading Tertullian a bunch lately, and how it's like you try and stamp us out, you try and grind us down into powder and crush us into the earth, and all you're doing is the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. That idea. So it's like you're just planting us in a seed, and we will grow and outgrow you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And so I found that so great, honestly, that they were trying to make fun of them, and it's like you can't win. You know that, right? It's so obvious.
Yeah, I mean this guy Greg Knetley of Metal Injection.
Yes, yeah.
He says, I'm not here to shit on Christian metal bands. I've been a longtime fan of Extol, Demon Hunter, and Believer. It's just when I clicked on this video, I was surprised to hear him call an anti-porn call out. But hey, y'all, you got to do what you got to do. I hope everyone had fun and nobody jerked off. You know what I mean? Like, and that's that's the article. Like that's the article. There's nothing about
just clickbait. That's all it was.
Yeah,
and like, look at me.
Clickbait. Yeah, having another dumb conversation. And looking at it,
he makes a lot of slide articles about Christians and metal and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's just it's just kind of like I don't care. Like I really don't give a crap what anybody says.
Like right now, the first trending article on Metal Injection is Lucifer's Hammer's vocalist dead at 38, and the second one is Behemoth is trying to tell us something about God and pooping. And can you guess who wrote that article about God and pooping?
Greg Knetley.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
right there. And
yeah.
it's,
Well, I'll never make it on there. We know that.
I mean, at least he has the respect to put in the tour dates for Behemoth this time. You know what I mean? So it's just like Ted Nugent a few years ago, and then it's kind of funny. On the Dallas Observer, there's an article called "Is Conservatism the New Punk Rock?" And it's almost like to rebel against the scene because of how pervasive everything else is. It's like traditionalist values, which is something that a lot of people are seeing return to of the way. And as somebody who was very drawn to orthodoxy and trying to find, what is the original faith and what does that mean? People are drawn to finding, because there's just so much nonsense in the world right now. So it's just
Yeah,
like, why would I go and, listen with the crowd and go with the flow when, that doesn't, it doesn't, it leads, it's hollow. It doesn't, it's
yeah,
not filling. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
which is a better breakfast, oats or bacon and eggs? Bacon and eggs, because
yeah.
protein is going to keep you fuller longer.
Yep. Look at the metal ethos, and that is a secondary tier of importance in the life of a Christian. Like it's so down below, but it's like it's a real idea and an ethos that you kind of adhere to. If you're a blue collar worker, you have an ethos. If you're a white collar, whatever. I mean, but like it's so the metal ethos is kind of like be true to yourself, true to what you believe, and don't care what anybody says. I 100% believe that because that's a Christian ethos. That is, you are, you only answer to God, not man, in the end. So they would like to use this idea, we're going against the church and all this stuff, whatever. But it's like, I actually agree with your ethos. I just end up in the different place. But you'll find that a lot of these older school metalheads that were in that era, a lot of them have respect now for Christians, even if they don't believe. But it's like you can't deny I mean, look at Hellhammer playing on Antester's Forsaken album years ago. He's going to do what he wants. You're not going to tell me what to do. So it's kind of like we agree on that. Okay, there's some common ground. You know, we're not all going to believe the same, but boy, let's find some common ground because we're still all human. We share a common humanity. And as Christians, I'm supposed to love you, even love my enemies. And I am go over and above this pettiness, and I am to find a place to serve you. And I can do that once I know that we're on the same. It helps when we're on the same level on certain things that we can have a conversation conversation has been the best thing that's come out in the last couple of years between everyone. Like we were so just everybody's in their camps, and now we're at least having conversations. And I think that that's very important to do. That's how people grow.
And I feel like I was privileged because something I was really into in high school was the debate club. And so, and because I was in Utah, I often would adopt, stances that I didn't agree with. It was kind of funny because in high school, 2008, it was like Hillary, Obama, and that kind of stuff. And the conversation of how it was, it's just like there's nuance in conversation. People can have ideas, and being counter to that, allows you to kind of and see that. And so a lot of this stuff I believe has probably been influenced by, having to be on the other side of the aisle to argue those points and to do that, because at the end of the day, uh, it's about winning in debate, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure you can have a moralistic inclination to argue for whatever the topic is, but you can really dive into a topic and look at many different aspects of it. You know what I mean? So it's like the conversations that people are having and kind of what people are craving right now, or just because people have found that the zeitgeist that is currently happening is just, it's full of shit.
Yep.
It doesn't lead to anything substantial.
You can't say that, sir. You're going to be canceled now.
Canceling this whole thing. It's just like, it's such a dumb idea. Such a dumb idea. And it's so funny. CJ McCannon, who was on a band called Thy Art Is Murder, And
Yeah.
Thy Art is Murder was famous because it was specifically like theologian, Christian, or Muslim. They have tons of songs about, how corrupt people use religion as tools and become pawns and puppets. Similar to like Metallica song Puppet Master, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and you go back to like Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, what's that song? Witches Masks.
Oh, I'm not sure. Right on.
Uh, you know what I mean? Like that's literally talking about how people use people for religious scapegoats to, do that. And you go back even further, like Elvis Presley, how his dancing like that was, a moralistic uh, emergency on society and he should be
Yeah.
arrested. It's
Yeah.
just kind of crazy how it kind of progresses. And there's really stopping the dam water once it's been released from the floodgates is kind of impossible. It's kind of enduring whatever it is and being there. And it's funny seeing that, CJ McCannon got kicked out of Thy Art is Murder, and then he goes and he gets paid. I want to say his going rate's like 10K. So this band
Ooh.
Scapegoat paid him to do a collaboration, and he featured on the song, and it's got hits. We're talking about Bloodlines. They posted in September 5th their song Holiness Cries hit 500K streams.
Ooh, congrats.
Um, on December 4th, they posted their Spotify Wrapped. They had 111K listens, 1.7 million streams, almost 100K hours total over 153 countries. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
to say that, oh, people are just making fun of it. Christian metal is the future of metal.
I like to say Christian metal is more metal than metal.
Exactly.
Because we're hated on both sides. The church half the time doesn't like us, and the metal scene doesn't like us. Who are you left with? But you're still going to continue to do it because you're called to do it. And so it's more metal than metal, in my opinion, and I stand by that 100%. Not to turn it into like this punk rock type of like aesthetic, because I have to be very careful, like because I've been a Christian before I was a metalhead, and all of a sudden now, as things as you've seen, things have turned back around, where now it's punk rock to be Orthodox, Catholic, Christian. It's it's kind of like I want to make sure that I don't use my faith as a marketing tool. That's kind of loses its. That's not what I'm here to do. But this is who I am, and if people ask, and if this is who I am. This is who I've been. If people find that appealing through that, it's because I think it does make sense. It's because I am going to have this ideal in my head that no matter what, I have to be answerable to God. And as a human being, what else is there? If there isn't that, what's the point? What's the point of any of this? If we're not answerable to God, and that's the end of our life, the focal point, what's the point? You can, oh well, you're going to be good to your neighbor. Why? Why does it matter? Why? There has to, and so it's like, and then it comes back around to just how important all this is, and how real and glorious this all is. It's so important. It affects hearts and minds and souls in everything we do. Everything we do. So and now we're gonna have the organ play, and we're gonna have a hymn of invitation. So
Yeah, it's just like looking at people desire. Like there's a classic. So MySpace, a lot of bands like to be considered a MySpace era band is kind of like you are classic metal at that point. And With Blood Comes Cleansing just had Robert Manzone of Searching Serenity as the new vocalist, because the other one, whatever reasons they stepped down, and Robert stepped up and I would argue is filling the shoes really great. I mean, Robert works for an Episcopal church. He's got his band. He's got a lot of stuff going for him, and we kind of talked about hoping that I got a military assignment to Florida so I could go hang out with them and
okay.
do an episode in person. I might hit him up when I go down to Florida later next year. But I think people want they want that. There's a craving for it. There's a desire. There's so much craziness going on in the world. It's kind of like what do we need to do? And uh it's like what whether it's the fact that somebody drove a car through a crowd at a Christmas thing in Germany that pretended that they weren't a Islamist jihadist, but did that, drove through a Christian market crowd, and then people are saying, oh, it's not respective of blah 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 with their arguments. And then people come out with articles saying this is not an attack on Christians. Excuse me.
Since when have we not been attacked?
Imagine somebody doing that for an Eid market, or during Ramadan, a Christian doing that, how much it would be. But no, we can't offend, or we can't call it out, what it is.
And here's been the best part about, okay, so let's go back to 20. I don't even like to say the year. It really, literally triggers me. Let's go back to 2020. That was a bad year. And with everything that was going on, and then just a little tangent, they act like none of this ever happened. Anyway, but the entire world was upended. Everyone's looking around. Even the church, especially, this got to be so bad. The churches in America were even just like, no wonder everybody's sitting there saying that like the evangelical and Protestant church wing in America is weak, because look at what you guys did. And that's a Protestant. Dang it. I get mad because I saw it in my own church, and everything collapsed, and everything that you once knew just washed away. And the society washed away, and rules, and the church, and everything else. And then so everybody now, through this horrible time, is looking and searching for the foundation. And they're going back. They're reading church history. They're reading history itself. And it has caused so many people. Look at like Russell Brand. Look at a guy like him. You hear guys like Joe Rogan talking and being open to Christian ideas that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was totally off the table. Culturally, nope, not even going to touch it. They're making fun of us, whatever. And now it is becoming, to lack of a better word, cool to become Christian, which, great, awesome. I have no problem with that. It is cool, but it's like that worst time in the world ended up becoming such a blessing to the world, because now all of a sudden people are finding out that the way of the world that you thought was so great, and it just collapses in a second. And it lifts the veil from people's eyes, and it gets them to start searching for God, looking at Jesus, looking for the Spirit, the thing that's real, that doesn't change. So, and I struggled with that a lot, because I'm like, this was such a bad time. But now I see it like, there's a reason God let us go through all this. It was tough, no lie. But look at what the fruit of it has been. It's been really interesting to see. So,
and I think people want to do that because they started to realize a lot of this stuff is BS. It's like the whole COVID kind of opened people's eyes, and there's arguments, but it's to say that it's one way and there's no nuance of thought or idea or difference. It's so funny. I saw a video of a comedian who was talking about how a man in Tennessee burned down a Planned Parenthood that was being rebuilt, right? And so his lawyers in court are saying we're arguing it's not a crime, it's not a hate crime, it's an arson crime, because he didn't burn down a Planned Parenthood because it was under construction. And then you have the other side, the state, arguing that it was, which is funny, is because if you compare that to the conception, life and conception argument, it's like the sides flipped for whatever's convenient. You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh yeah.
And so it just kind of shows the hypocrisy of it all, where it's just like it is this or it's that, or it's like trust the science. Oh, I think we should be skeptical of the science and wait for things to happen. And
well, it was the veil. It's like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah,
when the thing
behind the curtain.
Exactly. and people realize that through that time. And so that's
Yeah.
been good, tough
And
time, but it's been good.
and I think the best thing that COVID did was it kind of like revitalized some stuff that's going on. And like the biggest right now, the controversy in academia is people are using chat GBTs or, generative prompt transformers to aid in research or whatever. Because English is the standardized language for publication. So to be big. And it's showing that these peer reviewed sites are not really, at this point, it's a pay to play. It,
Yep.
it, and they're not even going through the full motions because if you read the abstract, it starts with like the chat GPT response. Oh, I'm not an official translator. You probably should have this translated by somebody who is, but here's your text.
Who's somebody
Or-
who's alive?
Yeah. And that's the beginning of the paper's abstract. And it's just like, it's just so wild. And then to pretend that scientists don't do shady stuff all the time, it's like, people are so tone deaf these days. It's sad because it's like I was interested in pursuing a PhD. I still might if if 120K drops in my pocket, I'll start a PhD program. But I'm on these websites and they're like, oh, we can't be that because it's not what the science says. But then it's like the science was paid for. It was bought. You clearly have these institutions and these individuals will go, hey, what do I do? Because the way PhD works is you typically, depending what it is, like say it's a physics, you're going through physics. Your project is probably going to be whatever your program chairs, not program chair, but your no, what's the term? It your whatever, people put the right word in the comments, but you go off of their research or study. And this person was like, he keeps asking us to redo the numbers, and it's like we keep rerunning the statistics and it keeps coming up with the same answer, that his thesis, it's not true.
Yeah.
And so he was like asking them to sell their values and sell their integrity to make the data match the thesis, which isn't what it is. And I think a side point, I think that if academic institutions who want to utilize the pure research thing, which is a funny conversation because Ghislaine Maxwell's father started the whole online journal publication thing, which is an interesting rabbit hole to go down. I think that if somebody wants to be serious, when they submit their paper, they have to submit the raw data. I want to see everything that you recorded because it's not that I don't trust you, but I want to verify that you were doing the right thing. And I think that's the issue right now. There's a big topic. I don't want to get onto that to be there, but there's a topic where, I think there are some things that are safe, but to say that there are things that have no side effects, I think it's wrong. I mean, look at years ago, science was bought to basically say sugar is healthy, it's fine, but fat is bad.
Yeah.
And then the same thing, canola oil used to be, it was poisonous because we had a manufacturing process that couldn't take those chemicals out. But eventually during World War, it was used as a motor oil. And then what do we do with all this canola oil? Well, we can't consume it because it's not healthy, but somebody came up with the process that said it makes it to where it's healthy. And then seed oils are introduced and suddenly society is getting fat and has a spike in cancer rates. Like, it's like to say that, it works when the data doesn't match that. As America, we're one of the unhealthiest countries in the world. We spend more money on health than anyone else, but we're the unhealthy. Obviously there's something going on here that doesn't match the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think people are waking up to the narratives and they're starting to question that, which has become very scary. And I think there's a need of caution. We need to be cautious. And I think it's really hard to do that in a society that needs things instantaneously.
Oh, yes.
And it's just, there's so much going on. And I feel like that's why a lot of people are starting to question their beliefs, their paradigm, their worldviews of things that they once held true. Maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Like now Russell Brand, you brought him up earlier. He was in a movie called it was a breakup movie from the Judd Apatow era of comedy movies. He
Forgetting
was
Sarah
the
Marshall.
Yeah, forgetting Sarah Marshall. I was going to say Along Came Polly, but that's Ben Stiller. It's like he was the stoner dude, and now
Yeah.
he's openly posting videos of his baptism. Now, there's a part of me, what's that term? The skeptical side that goes, what if he's just smart enough to realize this is where the tide is turning?
Mhm.
And so he's trying to tap into that to make money. Um, whether
It-
he is or isn't, it's
yeah.
still showing. Like Jordan Peterson is reading, is reading through the Bible. Like that is insane.
Yeah, we got tickets to see him in March. I got that for my wife for Christmas. And she also got We Who Wrestle It. She's really big into Jordan Peterson. She discovered him. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've known about him for years. I mean, not Christian, but really good to listen to. Makes a lot of good points. And was hated because he was saying, like, wow, a lot of this stuff makes sense, even though I'm not all the way there yet. He's like, boy, this has this logic to it. And everybody's like, cancel him. All this stuff. Also, by the way, you can cut this part out. I got about 10 minutes, if that's okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and break. So, yeah, it was funny because we were actually just upstairs watching him before this with his interview with Dallas Jenkins. And I've had some questions about Dallas Jenkins because I haven't really looked into him much. But as far as like his background and stuff, I love The Chosen. The Chosen's great. I just don't know much about him, but it's been really interesting to watch his interview with him. And you have all these people that are, like you said, their worldview fell apart because it was revealed that their worldview was bullcrap. And it's like that song we have, The Mountain of Man's Ignorance. All these scientists and philosophers are scaling the mountains of man's ignorance, and it's from that book, God and the Philosophers, which the ending paragraph in it may or may not be sarcasm, but the way I took it was that the philosophers and the scientists have scaled the mountain of man's ignorance, and they've gone up this mountain peak, and they've worked really hard, and they finally get there, only be greeted by theologians who have been there for hundreds of years. And I'm like, yeah, because what you made fun of and ridiculed as simple or blind faith or whatever was never that. You were the one that was blind. We've been here the whole time. We can show you if you'll listen, and we welcome you here. Like, we've been wanting you here. You know, we don't hate you. We're not trying to be like, "Ha, told you so," because that's not good. But just like, yeah, this is it. This paradigm and of faith and of the Christian faith is it. This is true. Like, we've been trying to tell you this. Maybe we didn't say it so well over the time, but you know, it's people are finally realizing that because their worldview slipped away in the current. It was the house that was built on sand.
And I think that's American sense. People say Christ is a carpenter, but that was just the old English term that they picked to match what it was. And in reality, he sure Jesus probably knew woodworking, but let's use his parables and his example. How often does he refer to stone construction? So he probably was a craftsman, and it's
Yeah.
people are becoming more aware of that or whatever, and looking at the historical aspects of it. But it's like, how are we building the foundation? I think if we go back to a kid, the nursery, the three little pigs, which pig had the house that withstood the wolf? The one
Yep.
that was built the best.
Yep.
And as something, my wife is Brazilian, and she was looking at that. We were looking at the houses. We couldn't really find anything that was affordable to buy here, whatever, to build equity and be able to do that. And she's like, you think about it, you're paying so much extra for a wood house. In my country, you get concrete. And it's true. For the same, I could spend $180,000 in Brazil and get a 7-bedroom room with security and a maid. And if I wanted to, a
Woo!
little bit extra, I could get an at-home cook. Yeah. For a concrete house that's going to survive.
We love
You
you,
know what I mean?
Brazil.
Yeah. And, that awakening and realizing the things that are there, and it's just kind of, um, swaying along. And I think people are waking up to that. Now, I don't agree with everything Jordan Peterson says, but I think
Yeah.
some of the stuff he says is powerful. He said something about lust, and he was talking about, Jesus was talking about he look at lust after, lust is committed and adultery is committed upon just looking. You know what I mean? He commented and he said, marriage is the decision to exclude all other women. I think I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's as close as it is. That's a powerful saying for somebody to understand what it means, what monogamy means, what marriage means. You are choosing one person over everybody else.
Yep.
And so I think I'm hesitant in listening to what he says. I think right now I've had debates with other people about a internet preacher, Mari Emanuel, who was recently stabbed in Australia. In my current theological paradigm, he's a heretic. He belongs to a heretical church. He was an historian in that own church, kicked him out or whatever. And he does have a lot of powerful stuff. And I think what it matches to is what Christ said, wolves will come to you in sheep's clothing. You shall know them by their fruits. And I think to know them by their fruits implies that we need to know what fruit is. Because if we don't know what it is, how can we be aware or cautious of it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have the personality type that likes to buy up stuff, if that makes sense. Like I get fully invested. That's why if I ever got into golfing, I know I'm going to be spending, tailor-made golf set. You know what I mean? I don't need that.
Yeah.
But some people, now that I'm older and more mature, I know that about myself to like, well, slow down, pump the brakes, let's do it. Somebody told me a long time ago, if there's something you really want, wait 3 months. If you still think about it, maybe it's something you really do need.
It's a good point.
And then sometimes I'll be thinking, I was like, oh, that was 9 months ago. And so I think that's another thing that Christ talks about is the willingness to deny yourself the instant pleasure.
Oh yeah.
And there's so much that goes on with that. And it also the maturity and learning to do that and to develop. A few podcasts ago, I had a friend on, we talked about psychoanalytics and comparison to a Christian aspect, right? And how we have operating systems, like you have Android and you have iPhone, but now you have Google and Microsoft and these counter phones, Raspberry Pi phones or whatever. People have certain programs that are very, very hard to change.
Yeah.
We can download applications and kind of work with what we have, but understanding that certain things just will not work on it,
Yes. Well, I'll wrap up with this but you're like, because I'm kind of the same way with like Jordan Peterson. It's one of those things where it's kind of like being who I am and where I'm from, and growing up as one of the only Christians among my group of metal friends. I'm very used to like being the only one that believes a certain way, but I'm also very used to trying to listen and like be a listener, grab what I can from people. And so like with Jordan Peterson, you can tell that he is searching. And boy, he seems like he's right there a lot of times. And it's one of those things that I kind of see it like you look back through all the stories in the Bible. How many times did God use somebody that you would never think, that you would never think that God would use? Look at Cyrus. He used Cyrus to bring the people out of Babylon, to go back and rebuild the temple. So it's kind of like, I think as Christians, for one, that we have to recognize that God can use whoever he wants, and he does quite often, to the chagrin of all of us, kind of like, well, I would have never seen that one coming, and then like Mari Emanuel, and I saw them on TikTok and all this stuff, and because I could have a whole conversation, and I'd love to at some point, about like, because he's not even in the Assyrian Church of the East. Like they kicked him out too. Yeah. But so it's kind of like, it's very like church history stuff where everybody's fighting and arguing and like, you said this, no, I didn't. This is what I mean. No, you mean this. Anathema. Everybody's anathema. you know, but I'm gonna keep doing this, but I'm here, we're kicking him out and everything, and it's reading all the church history. It's a lot. It's very interesting. Really into the weeds now, not just like Eusebius and Polycarp and all that, but like really far into the weeds, all the random councils throughout 1,000 years and stuff. Um, and so as I'm over here in America, as you know, I don't consider myself a Protestant. I'm not protesting anything. I'm just trying to follow Jesus. What the Bible says, that's where I start. And then I was just turned on to church history years ago. I'm like, well, this makes perfect sense to me. It's like, well, what did they believe about what the Bible said? Well, let's check what they said. We should do that. Makes sense. And that's been great, very fruitful for me over the years. And so it's like, but then I see like a guy like Marr, and I hear what he said. I don't know him exactly, and I don't agree with him on every single thing, but I'm like, okay, but so as a Protestant, and then I know that some people in his own circles didn't like him either, but yet he still continues to do what he's doing. So there's a little bit of that Americanism in there, like, kind of like, keep pushing forward. I'm not going to be told I'm wrong. Only God can judge me, that type of thing. So I respect that a little bit, and that's kind of like that more colloquial cultural thing. But I think, and I think at the end of the day, this is where I'd like to sum up my point in all this, is what I have felt led to do as best as I can. In my position with the tiniest bit of influence, maybe. Apparently some people, I guess I'm older now, so oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm like one of the older people in the scene somewhat. But like, I'm going to do everything I can to bring everybody together, find that common ground, both Christian, non-Christian, on different levels. Because that's what I feel like we're supposed to do, is get it. We're love. I can speak in the tongues of angels and all these other things, other divine mysteries, but if I don't have love, I'm a clanging cymbal. It's meaningless. We have to start there. And so it's like, I can do that. I don't know how much I can else do, but I can do that. I can at least try and help us love each other in the best way I know how. And that goes, Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, and because in the metal scene, in the Christian scene, I see it. I see obviously Constantinople and Rome, not very big fans of each other, and nobody likes the Orientals. They got kicked out in 451. So, but, but basically just like in the Christian metal scene, I don't see that as much. I see a lot more brotherhood, a lot more commonality, a lot more calling each other brother. You're a Christian. You are a brother in Christ. And I was like, wow, that's really great. Like, we should be working towards unity. And I see it in the Christian metal scene more so than in the church at large. And maybe that's because we have this unique position of persecution from both sides sometimes. So me, with what I'm trying to do with my influence, is love people how I know God wants me to do. I know God wants me to love people. Have these conversations with people. Bless them with the work God's given me to do, which is my primarily art and music, so that we can put our guards down, so that we can start to have these conversations in love. And because the world fell apart, right? All the paradigms were torn down. Everything, the veil was removed, and we saw the man behind the curtain. And so everybody's looking for that. And it's like, well, we got to start here. We should start here in love, working together as best we can. We're never going to agree on everything. That I know. And it's just not possible. But boy, there needs to be this brotherhood. There needs to be and if I can help that out, that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I like the Golden Order of the Almighty, because you have people in that from all over the world, and it's like this way of like brotherhood, of finding that commonality amongst Christians. And like I said, I'm fully well aware that there's people you won't agree with me on everything, and I don't agree with you on everything, um, and that's life. And so we start, but we can't agree on love. That we can't agree on. You know, at a very foundation. Let's start there. Because now's the time. The fields are ripe in the world for loving people closer to God. It's so clear and obvious in the world that that's, I think, where God wants us to be. Like, hey, the fields are open. You know, look at the harvest, but there's no workers for the harvest. Go start harvesting. And I also think about the fact that like the disciples argued a bunch with amongst each other. Yeah, they did. You know, James and John trying to, hey, we're going to be at your right and left, and everybody, and it's kind of like, okay, we got a big job here to do. Let's start with love, and that's what I'm trying to do through my music is just be that person to love others. Because if we don't have that, it's not going to work. So that's kind of like where I wanted. That's where I'm at personally in my life with the band, with the music, and also to just make really awesome, heavy stuff more and more. So.
And it's awesome. I've enjoyed our interactions online. Sometimes we go back and forth in the comments, and I've noticed a humility that when there's something that we don't really know fully, we're clear about that. And I think that's something that people need to be better about, is to recognize what you don't know.
Yes.
And they say for PhD defense, they're trying to figure out what you don't know, right?
Yes.
And so being able to recognize that is something that I think takes time, skill, and practice. And Saint Seraphim of Sarov was who said, "Whatever you do, do it gently and unhurriedly, because virtue is not a pear to be eaten in one bite." And I am somebody that struggles with patience. I have very, very little of it, and so I want to jump all the way into the deep end of the pool, but sometimes you forget maybe you can't swim the shallow end. So like, why are you going to the deep end?
Yeah.
And so taking things slowly and studying them out, and not just, taking it, everything should be taken for a grain of salt. Somebody's always trying to sell you something. And I think while divisions do separate us, and to an extent, I do think it's important to understand what beliefs are. It was critical for Christian tradition is built on theological disagreement and discussion. The Bible was literally formed because the question was, is this appropriate? No, that's Gnostic text. And so we have to come together to figure out what is appropriate. And that's whole conversation, as you pointed out before.
Oh, yeah.
And so to study out, I think, is something that is critical. And I think we're getting to the days of bench warmers aren't needed. We need people who can go out on the field.
Yep.
And instead of being embarrassment, we should be prepared for whenever the coach calls us in, because it will happen.
Yep.
And I think that's the basis of this podcast, is to be there. Spiritual danger close is a play on a combat term, danger close, meaning fire is close to the enemy and to the ally or the troops. And so having spoken with people who in a time of war, whose job was to call it in, who discussed having a bomb dropped on terrorists that were 50 feet away, and not knowing whether or not they were going to survive the blast as well. And talking about how they knew if they didn't kill them, it would hurt everybody else. And so the willingness, it's not to become a willing martyr, but Christ gave himself. So I think at some point we're expected to give a little, give some or give all, give a little, give none. But the willingness to be there, it doesn't come easy. You know what I mean?
No. Eventually we figure out that anything that's worth doing is worth doing 100%. I didn't used to be that way. I was very kind of like half-ass, if I could say that. Everybody else says it too. They might not say it on a podcast, but they say it. But as I've gotten older, you realize that that's not going to cut it. It leaves you empty, and you get older and you realize that people are relying on you. You lay down your life, you lay down what you want to do when you're called upon to do it, to serve others, because you're a soldier. And so that's what soldiers do. I mean, I'm not sure your background, but I think you are a literal soldier if you've got military deployments. But as soldiers in Christ, we are to serve others and put them first, consider others better than ourselves, not look just only to our own needs and interests, but to the interest of others as well. And that's what we're called. It's a huge thing to do. But man, it's exciting. It's a lot. Man.
And for me, I know you got a little bit of time. You got to go here soon, but I was in the ICU earlier this year. I've had 3 surgeries.
Wow.
I've had an incredible journey that kind of has awakened me and has caused me to start, I hate to use this term, deconstructing, but questioning previously held beliefs. And so I think that soldiering takes practice and it takes discipline. Look at how often Paul talks about putting on the whole armor of God. I want to say that was Paul talking to Timothy, or Peter talking to Timothy, one of the two. And it's something that doesn't come easily to others, and it takes practice. And if you're not out playing, you get bad. And so something I've been terrible at is I haven't been practicing vocals. If you were to ask me to sing one of my songs right now, I would be creaking and groaning and coughing.
I understand that. Yeah.
So like you talked about your second play song is psychosocial. You know what I mean? You play the drums, you have to keep playing.
Yeah.
Because we are creatures of habit. And so we have to find out what the good habits are. But I really appreciate, Logan, your time. If people want to listen to your music, where can they find you?
We are on all major streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere that you can get music. We are available. We are on Instagram at Symphony_of_Heaven. Just simple search in Instagram can find us there. We're on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. We have all the major stuff that every other band has. We have a Discord channel. You can get all that stuff. A Discord server. You can get to all that stuff through a link tree in our bio on Instagram or through our website, symphony-of-heaven.com. And I want to thank you for having me on here. This has been really good. Hopefully we can do this again. Because as you can tell, I have a lot to say. And even in like an hour and a half to 2 hours, it's just the beginning.
I know we have a new year coming up. Is there anything to expect from Symphony of Heaven that you are allowed to talk about?
Well,
so it sounds like there is.
Well, that's the thing. We released the album. It went wonderful. And we did that all independently, by the way. That's a great episode to talk about, too, as far as the music scene and the corruption in there. In general, like the major guys up top. But maybe not corruption's not the right word. I'm sorry. I'm a little butthurt sometimes on some things. But it was really good on that. We're going to continue on with where this album started, and the fleshing out and revealing more of the stories and the lore and the history associated with the stories on this album and the Golden Order of the Almighty, which I love the Golden Order of the Almighty. It's so much fun and so cool, and it's a great way if you want to get into church history. The Golden Order of the Almighty is a really good metal way to do it, and so we're going to be continuing on with that. I have some other projects myself that will be coming out this year, God willing. But we're going to continue we're already writing new music in Symphony of Heaven every time we get together, and just really trying to take it up another 100, 200 levels from where we were. Because my ethos and my vision right now is that I absolutely will not stop until I conquer it all. Not in a selfish way, but because I feel like God's telling me to do that. Conquer it for him. And like, that's my own personal mindset in this. I absolutely will not stop. Kind of like a Terminator. So
Well, I appreciate it, man. This is really great. I will put the links, everything you said in the show notes and on publications. And we got to do this again. Let me know whenever you're free.
Absolutely.
And we'll be able to make it work. And have a great one. God
yes,
bless.
and thank you. God bless. Thanks for having me, man.